How can you make that 9-year-old sit in a class and say, do me 17 times tables? What for? What if I were to say that arithmetic, as we teach it today, is an obsolete skill? Okay? The whole world will erupt if I say that, because they will say, reading, writing, arithmetic. That's the core of whose education? Core of the military education. Go back 200 to 300 years in this country and say that, 300 years later, no one's going to teach anybody how to shoot a gun, and no one's going to teach anybody how to ride a horse. And the teacher is going to say, but, those are basic life skills. This guy will get killed when he moves out. And you have to say, no, ma'am, the world will have changed. These things will become sport. Shooting is a sport. Horse riding is a sport. Will arithmetic be a sport in 2061?
Video games are actually among the most powerful learning tools that have ever been created. Because if you look at a child when they first pick up a video game, they'll start and they'll play for 5 minutes, and then they'll fail. Pick themselves up, start again, play for 10 minutes. They fail. And they will do this 500 times before they finally succeed and master the video game. Learning things all along the way, completely self-motivated. And while I don't always endorse the notion of instant gratification, I certainly endorse the notion of relevance. In education, we provide problems separate from the relevance or the context in which they need to be used. That's one of the reasons why students are so disengaged. In the video game world, it's all about exploration. You solve a problem when you bump into it, and in fact, that provides the relevance for solving the problem.
12 years ago, in 1999, I said, well, how did I learn to write a program? Nobody taught me. How do children learn to use computers? Nobody seems to be actually teaching them. So I stuck a computer in a slum wall, a nice big computer in those days with a nice big broadband connection, in front of children who had never seen computers before, hadn't heard of the internet, had no clue what was going on, didn't know English. And they started browsing in about 5 or 6 hours' time. And then it happened over and over and over again everywhere, until the experiment kind of burst out onto the world media with this statement that children anywhere in groups can teach themselves to use a computer. There appears to be no limit to this, that children can teach themselves almost anything if given the internet, given the permission to interact with each other, and given the absence of the teacher. The absence of the teacher in the presence of the internet can become a pedagogical tool. Why would schools be so rigid if they didn't need to be rigid? But when did they need to be rigid? If we look at history, the answer stares at us. Education as we know it came from war. The Victorians, the amazing Victorians, produced an education system which would make us photocopies of each other. A 5-year-old today, by the time he's 25, it's going to be 2031. Can any teacher say that they're preparing that child for 2031, for an unknown world? Well, I believe that I can make a curriculum for that teacher, and that curriculum needs to have only 3 things in it. Reading comprehension is the most critical skill at this point in time for a generation that's going to read off screens for the rest of their lives. Information search and retrieval skills. If people know what are keywords, follow a link or not, it's a key skill. If arithmetic is an outdated skill, this is the skill that will replace it. And finally, if a child knows how to read, if a child knows how to search for information, how do we teach them how to believe? See, in our adult heads, each one of us has a little mechanism. It comes from different places. You and I have different mechanisms of how to believe. Sometimes we say, this is obvious. Sometimes you say, because so-and-so told me. Sometimes you say, this is rubbish. What's that machine inside? How early in a child's life can we put that in there? If we can do it really, really early, then we would have armed that child against doctrine. And I don't mean only religious doctrine. I mean doctrine in all its forms. I think our job as educators, the biggest job in today's information-saturated world, is to give the child an armor against doctrine. Just as in another generation we used to teach a child how to fight with a sword and how to ride a horse.